right? Okay. So, guys, just to give you a small introduction about myself, I am Shashan Dias and I am the head lecturer here at the Success Academy, right? So, for the past 2 years, we have been conducting IELTS classes. So, I have my TEFL qualification, which is teaching English as a foreign language qualification, right? I'm also an associate of the Trinity College of London. I'm a licentiate holder in the West London University, right? So I have been teaching IELTS for the past 2 years. In my institute, we also have a number of other teachers. Our teachers like innova IELTS classes මාත් එක්ක conduct කරන, right? So over the years, we've had more than 200 students who have successfully got the marks that they wanted, right? I am not someone who believes in fake results in the sense I don't promote my classes saying everybody who joins is going to get band 8 or band 9, right? මම බොරුවට marks බොරුවට ප්‍රදර්ශනය කරන කෙනෙක් නෙමෙයි. මම හැමෝටම කියන්නේ ඔක්කොටම ඇවිල්ලා මෙතන band 8 band 9 ගන්න පුළුවන් කියලා, right? I'm very realistic in my approach and I think we have got all of these good feedback because we are genuine, right? In my classes, in my free webinars, I mean, we conduct a lot of free stuff. We put videos on YouTube. We conduct webinars like this, right? And aside from that, we also have our 10-day IELTS preparation program, right? And what I always tell my students is, you tell me what the band score you need to achieve. What is the band score that you need to achieve? ඔගොල්ලන්ට යන්න ඕන band score එක මොකක්ද? සමහර අය මංගාවට ඇවිල්ලා තියෙනවා band 4.5 තමයි ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ requirement එක. UK වගේ migration purposes වලට යන්න සමහර විට ඒගොල්ලන්ට අවශ්‍ය band score එක 4.5. There are some students whose band score is their requirement is 5.5, 6. Some students have 7, 8, 8.5. 8.5 is very rare, but some students, they require an overall band score of 8, right? So it doesn't matter what your score is. Once I understand, okay, this is what my student needs, that then we can start actively working towards that goal, right? So I'm not saying everyone needs to get a band 8 or everyone needs to get a band 9. I will identify what score you need, and then I will help you work towards that, right? So that is our journey, guys. For the past 2 years, we have helped more than 200 people successfully get the band scores they want and successfully migrate to the countries that they want, successfully go to the countries they want for their academic purposes, all right? And I really take pride in giving my students the best possible service that I can. I mean, I've been teaching for 2 years. Never once has ever a student complained about our lessons, ever, right? Every feedback that we have got has been positive so far, right? 100% of the feedback we have got has been positive. And I really believe in providing a genuine service. So in today's webinar, right, we are going to touch on a few things. Other webinar එකේ අපි දේවල් කිහිපයක් cover කරන්න යනවා. We're going to touch on a few things. Number one, I'm going to do a very, very short introduction into the IELTS exam itself. Okay, I'm going to give you, now there were some people, or actually one person who said that she's just starting out or she's just taking this step towards IELTS, right? So there might be more people like that. There's about 200 people here. So there might be more people like that who are just getting started. May IELTS ගමන පටන් ගන්න අය මෙතන ඉන්න පුළුවන්. Right? පටන් ගන්න අය මෙතන ඉන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ හැමෝටම මම පොඩි introduction එකක් කරනවා IELTS exam එක ගැන. Right? I'm going to give you a very small idea about the overall IELTS exam. We can't dive deep into everything. We can't dive deep into listening, writing, speaking, because 2 hours is not enough time, right? So very short introduction about the overall IELTS test is number one, what we're going to do. Then I'm going to talk about the reading test. That is the main focus of today's webinar. 80% or 90% of this webinar, of these 2 hours, is going to be dedicated towards the reading test. Okay, so regardless of whether you are doing the academic test or the general test, I will discuss how to approach the questions, how to study for the reading test, how to follow a specific strategy in order to get the best possible mark at the reading test? What are the different question types that you may get in the test? And also, what are the best strategies that you can follow to, number one, improve your comprehension, right? What are the best strategies you can follow to improve your comprehension? And number two, what are the best strategies you can follow to find answers and then get the best possible band score, right? Okay, so with that being said, let's talk about what the IELTS exam is, who needs to take it, and a small discussion about the different parts. Okay, so IELTS is the International English Language Testing System. IELTS කියලා කියන්නේ International English Language Testing System එකට. IELTS is the most recognized English language test in the world, right? There are other tests, there are other competitors. So PTE is probably the biggest competitor for IELTS, right? PTE is the biggest competitor for IELTS. Recently, I actually found out there's an exam called Duolingo, right? Not that there's an exam called Duolingo, right? But there was an app called Duolingo that's now offering an English test that is also recognized by different universities, right? But of course, these are less recognized universities, or these are less recognized tests when compared to the IELTS exam. Globally, IELTS is the most recognized English language test ever. All right. So PTE being its biggest competitor, right? Now, a common question that I get from a lot of students is, which one is easier? Is the PTE test easier, or is the IELTS test easier? Now, these are questions that maybe you also have. ඔගොල්ලන්ටත් තියෙන ප්‍රශ්නයක් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. IELTS the lazy, එහෙම නැත්නම් PTE the lazy කියන එක. The answer to that question is like this, okay? PTE is a completely computerized test, right? It's a completely computerized exam. Whereas IELTS offers both options. You have a completely computerized version, which is the computer-based test, and you also have the paper-based test. Okay? Or a paper-based test එකක් තියෙනවා IELTS වල, computer-based test එකක් තියෙනවා IELTS වල, right? In the computer-based test, still, even though it's computer-based, the writing section and the speaking section is marked by a physical examiner or an actual person and not an AI system. Whereas in PTE, it's marked by an AI system. So the slightest mistake you make, especially with your pronunciation, especially with your spellings, the slightest mistake you make, you can't get a good score for PTE. Whereas for IELTS, they look into a lot more things than just your spellings and pronunciation and whatnot. All right. So me personally, of course, I'm biased since I'm mainly an IELTS teacher, but I believe IELTS is the better exam to take and the easier exam to get through. But again, it really depends on your level of English. Both exams are easy if your English is good, right? And both exams can be passed easily, or you can get to the mark that you want if you put in a little bit of effort. පොඩි උත්සාහයක් ගත්තොත්, ඇත්තටම වැඩ කරොත්, අනිවාර්යෙන් මේ exam දෙකම අමාරු නැහැ. ඔයාට අවශ්‍ය score එකට යන්න. Okay? In the IELTS test, there are mainly two types of exams you can take. Okay, there's a third test, but it's very less common. All right, very few people take it. It's taken for a very specific purpose. So the most common one, or the most common two, would be general and academic IELTS. General is for people who are going abroad for working purposes. වැඩ කරන්න රස්සාවලට පිටරට යන කට්ටියට තමයි general test එක අවශ්‍ය වෙන්නේ. Okay, it's mainly for people who are going abroad for working purposes, non-academic purposes. All right, the academic test obviously is for people who are going abroad for academic purposes. So if you're going abroad for your degree, master's, PhD, whatever it is, you have to do the academic test. Okay, when you go to book the test, either you can book it through the British Council website or the IDP website. These are the two main locations or two main centers you can book the exam through. You have another option other than without just saying general or academic. There's another option called UKVI. Again, this is a very common question I get. That's why I'm explaining this. UKVI කියලා කියන්නේ United Kingdom Visa and Immigration, right? UKVI stands for United Kingdom Visa and Immigration. So UKVI test is only done for people who are going to the UK. Okay, they require special seal from the UK Home Office. So with that seal, the exam is a bit more expensive. මේ seal එකත් එක්ක ගන්න exam එක තව පොඩක් ගණන්. හැබැයි මේක අවශ්‍ය වෙන්නේ UK යන කට්ටියට විතරයි. Right? Others can do the usual general test or the academic test. For those of you who are going to the UK, you might have to do the UKVI test. Is the exam structure different? Absolutely not. It doesn't matter whether you are doing the UKVI or the regular general academic. The structure is exactly the same. Okay. Now, between general and academic, there are small differences. General සහ academic test එක අතරේ පොඩි පොඩි වෙනස්කම් කිහිපයක් තියෙනවා. ඒවා මොනවද කියලා මම ඔයගොල්ලන්ට කියන්නම්. I'll tell you what those differences are. Okay. The exam format is like this. For those of you who are not familiar, the exam format is like this. On one day, you all have to do the listening, reading, and writing tests. Listening is number 1, reading is number 2, writing is number 3. Okay. For all 3 of these tests, you take 2 hours and 40 minutes. This is if you're doing the paper-based test. Okay. If you're doing the paper-based test, it takes you 2 hours and 40 minutes to complete listening, reading, and writing. Okay. If you're doing the computer-based test, it only takes you 2 hours and 30 minutes. And the reason for that is in the listening test, they give you an additional 10 minutes if you're doing the paper-based test. Again, the reason is they give you a question paper and they give you an answer sheet. So you have time to write your answers first in the question paper as you're listening to the recording. And then you get an extra 10 minutes to write your answers on the answer sheet. Okay. මුලින්ම ඔගොල්ලෝ question paper එකේ තමයි listening test එකට උත්තර ලියන්න ඕනේ. ඊට පස්සේ වැඩිපුර විනාඩි 10ක් දෙනවා answer sheet එකට ඒ answers මාරු කරන්න. Right? ඒකයි විනාඩි 40ක් වෙන්නේ. The reading test is 1 hour 60 minutes. The writing test is also 1 hour 60 minutes. Right? So 1 hour means 60 minutes. All right. Then you have the speaking test. The speaking test will either be held on a separate day or it might be held on the same day, but it's a separate test altogether, right? So you get 12 to 18 minutes to complete the speaking test. So there will always be an examiner, either physical examiner or an examiner through Zoom technology. But there will always be a person, and that person is who is going to conduct the speaking test. All right. The general and academic tests are only different in reading and writing. Okay. In reading, the major difference is a contextual difference. Okay. What does that mean? What does a contextual difference mean? It means in the general test, the content that is used in the general test is more day-to-day topics. Right? අපි එදිනෙදා කියවන දේවල් තමයි general test එකේ ගොඩක් වෙලාවට එන්නේ. Right? For example, you might get flyers. You might get cutouts from magazines. You might get general information like, let's say, information about fridges, information about the sale of kettles or rice cookers. Actually, one of the questions we are discussing today revolves around rice cookers, right? They might talk about the baggage claim at an airport, right? These are the kind of generic topics you might get in the general test. Whereas in the academic test the topics ටිකක් පැරෑරු, right? Topics are a bit more advanced. They are more academic, right? So it might come from academic journals, scientific magazines, things like that, right? Things that are more geared towards your academics, right? Whereas the general test has more generic topics, right? There is a small structural difference, nothing major, which we will discuss, right? But the main difference is that contextual difference. In the writing test, the only difference is in part one, where academic test takers have to write a report on a specific diagram or a pie chart, a bar chart, whatever diagram they have given, you have to write a report on that. Whereas general test takers need to write a letter. Okay, general test takers need to write a letter. Both of these test takers have to write an essay. Okay, both of these test takers have to write an essay. So some of you might be self-studying, some of you might be looking to go for a class, right? Mainly what you're going to need support with in a class is writing and speaking, because a lot of people mess up the writing structures. Most people don't know the correct writing structures. I've had students who are extremely good at English 100%ක් හොඳයි. මං ගාවට එන සමහර ස්ටුඩන්ට්ස් ලාගේ. නමුත් ඒගොල්ලෝ පළවෙනි පාර දෙවෙනි පාර කරලා writing test එක especially අනාගෙන තියෙනවා. They have got really low band scores for their writing test. And the reason, when I ask them, okay, send me some answers to look at, I realize they have no idea about the correct structures. Okay, they haven't written their answers in a proper structure, and no matter how good their English is, if they haven't stuck to specific structures, they haven't got the required amount of marks, right? So all we do is we fix the structure and they immediately get the marks. Of course, for students whose English is not that great, then we help, okay, understand what ideas to put in there, how to improve or include better vocabulary, steps they can take to improve the idea generation. We look at a lot of different things like that, right? Speaking, again, it requires an immense amount of practice and feedback, and also knowing how to elaborate, how to include better vocabulary, how to generate better ideas. These are some of the things that ideally a good class should look at. With listening and reading, it's just a matter of identifying the right techniques and then applying those techniques and practicing as much as possible until you achieve a high band score, right? So of course, now in this particular 2 hours, right, within this free webinar, I can teach you the techniques you need to then practice to get a high band score. I've had so many students, guys, who have, now we've done reading webinars before. I don't know if people who have taken part before are here, but I'm assuming they're not. Most people are new, right? Now, we've held reading webinars before, and just by attending one webinar and then applying those theories, guys, there's no point in coming for today's webinar and then not using the strategies we talk about, right? And if you're not going to practice, now there were some people who said, hey, I have my exam on the 16th. That's in 10 days. I think today's the 6th. No, today's the 4th. Sorry, today's the 4th. So there's about 12 days, right? 12 or 40, whatever. I'm not the best at math. 12 to 14 days before your test, right? 12 days before your test. And within these 12 days, if you're not going to apply the strategies that we talk about, then it's going to be difficult for you to get a high band score. That is if you're already struggling. Of course, if you're not, then you can go for the score you want. But if you're struggling, and if that is why you are here, then make sure to apply the strategies we talk about and practice reading questions every day until the day of your test. And I guarantee you can go for the score you want, right? No question about it, right? Because we've had so many students give us their testimonial in the past. Okay, so listening, reading, writing, and speaking, that's the order. All right, and then we come to band scores. Now, with regards to band scores, this is what you have to know. All right, band 1, 2, and 3 is usually reserved for people who are terrible at English. English භාෂාව පොඩ්ඩක්වත් කතා කරගන්න බැරි, තේරෙන්නේ නැති, අමාරුම අඩියක ඉන්න කට්ටියට තමයි බෑන්ඩ් 1 2 3 කියන ස්කෝස් රිසර්ව් කරලා තියෙන්නේ. Okay, සාමාන්‍යයෙන් මට එහෙම හම්බෙලා නැහැ 1 2 3 levels වල ඉන්න ඒ කියන්නේ 1 2 3 results ගත්ත ළමයි. ඒ level එකේ ළමයි ඕන තරම් එනවා අපි ගාවට. හැබැයි ඒගොල්ලෝ අපි ඊට වඩා උඩ තත්ත්වයකට හදනවා. Right? We usually get students who are at that level, but of course we help them get a better score. I've never seen a student, not in just my classes, but anywhere who have got band 1, 2, or 3. Very rare. There are few people I've known who got 3.5, but very, very, very rare that someone will get band 1, 2, or 3. Usually, most results would start from band 4 onwards. 4 and 5 are reserved for people who are average, right? Who are average in the English language. They're not great, they're not getting good marks for reading or listening. They can manage to write an essay or a letter or a report, and their speaking is subpar at best, right? That's what band 4 and 5 is usually reserved for. Band 6 and 7 typically means you're a decent English speaker. This would be most of the students. And most university requirements, especially if you're going for academic purposes, most academic requirements are for band 6.5 in the academic test, right? Band 6.5 එකට තමයි ගොඩක් වෙලාවට requirements තියෙන්නේ, right? Academic band 6.5, right? 7 means you're actually very decent in the English language. 8, so 7.58 means you're really good, right? That's where most people would peak, right? Most, even people with good levels of English, even people who are, who speak English as their day-to-day language, would usually end up with a 7.5 or 8, right? And then you have the exceptional cases who really study hard, who really focus, who really know what they want. Just because you know English, it doesn't mean you can get a band 8.5 or 9. Okay, you need to study hard for the test if you're looking to get a band 8.5 or 9. Like, you need to really think about it, identify your mistakes, work on your mistakes, and then try to be better. That's how you get 8.5 or 9, right? But most people can target 6 to 8. Band 6 to 8 is for a decent level of test taker, right? So I'm assuming most people here are looking to get that range, 6 to 8, right? Can I see a show of hands if you're targeting anywhere between 6 plus? Can I see a show of hands? I'm assuming that's most of you. Band 6 plus score එකක් requirement එකක් තියෙන කට්ටිය අත උස්සන්න බලන්න. Right. Okay, I'm assuming that's most of you, right? Very few people want band scores below 6. I mean, there are some people when they're going to the UK and all, they don't really need to have a very high band score. I've got people who have previously wanted band 4.5, band 5.5. එහෙම කට්ටිය ඉන්නවා, right? එහෙම requirements උත් තියෙනවා. නමුත් දැන් ඔයා මට පේන විදිහට ගොඩක් අයට මෙතනදි තියෙන්නේ 6.5, 7 plus scores, right? I see one 5.5. So you see, you get those requirements as well. 5.5. Okay, most are 6, 6.5, 7, 7.5. Again, 8 is reserved for special situations. Now, I get a lot of students who are in Belarus, who are in China, that are looking to go to the UK for medicine. Those students are required to get band 8, right? Band 8. So they have to get band 8 for listening and reading, and then 7.5 at least for writing and speaking. And overall, they need to have band 8, otherwise they can't go for their requirement, right? But for most of you here, 6 to 8 is the common band score, right? Okay. So then IELTS, like I said, is mainly offered through the British Council and IDP. It's managed by Cambridge Examinations mainly, right? But when you're booking the test, you can book it through the British Council and IDP. Now, again, students ask me which is the best, should I book it through British Council or should I book it through IDP? The answer is it doesn't really matter because the test is the same, right? There is no structural difference. There is no difference in the test. The only difference is in the environment and the facilities you get at each center. So that is not a big factor to consider, right? Either way, I know a lot of students who have done the exam through British Council. I know a lot of students who have done the exam through IDP. I myself have done it through the British Council. My brother did it through the British Council. But I know so many students who have done it at IDP with no problem. Okay. So, which is best? Both are the same. That's the answer, right? All right. And if you don't get the band score you need, now I know some of you, I hope this doesn't happen to you. But if it does, in case you do the exam and you don't get the band score you want, there are two options. One, you have to retake the entire test, or they have introduced this new thing called one skill retake. But one skill retake is only applicable for certain instances, and you need to check with your university or your visa manager or whoever's processing your visa whether one skill retake is applicable to you. Because sometimes, again, students have come to me and said, sir, I couldn't get the result I wanted for, let's say, reading, but my visa officer is saying I can't only do reading. So those instances are there, right? So most likely you would have to redo the entire test. In certain instances, you can do a one skill retake. Okay. The IELTS test is valid, or the score is valid for 2 years. So if you're planning to go abroad in the next, let's say, 2 years or 1.5 years, you can do the test now, right? Usually, I would suggest, or I would recommend doing the test about 4 to 5 months before, because now see, if you go through our classes, if you, not just our classes, right? If you go through a class and you actually learn the steps systematically, then there's a good chance you can go to your required score in one go, right? Instead of spending twice or thrice. But certain students prefer to do it themselves. And unfortunately, some students don't make it, right? They have to do it a second time, they have to do it a third time. So if that is you, right, I highly recommend doing the test about 5 months or 6 months before you have to go abroad, because then you have enough time. Like, you, let's say you do it in November and you don't get the result you want, right? Then you have about 5 months more to actually plan again, think again, practice again, and do the test, right? You can take it again in about 2 months instead of failing once and then immediately trying again and then wasting your money, right? So I would highly recommend doing the test about 4 to 5 months before you go abroad. Of course, for some students, that's not needed. I mean, even my brother, when he was going, he just did it about 1 week, 1 or 2 weeks before he had to apply for the visa, because it was a visa requirement, right? So it depends on your situation, but I would recommend doing it about 5 to 6 months before, right? Super. So with that being said, we are going into today's topic, which is IELTS reading. Okay. Before I continue, mama ඉස්සරහට තව යන්න කලින් මොනවා හරි ප්‍රශ්න තියනවාද? Do you have any questions? Okay. I see a question on the chat box which says, sir, can you please tell me how they calculate the final marks? So for listening and reading, they're just going to count your total marks, right? Let's say 30 out of 40 or 35 out of 40. So for listening, you have 40 questions. Reading, you have 40 questions. They're just going to calculate the marks, and then they have a criteria. So if you get, let's say, 1 to 10, you're getting a band 1 to 3, right? That's your range. So if you have to get to about 27 marks at the academic test to target a band 6.5, right? General test is a lot, not harder, but the marks you need to get for a high score is high. So for example, in the academic test, you need to get about 27 marks for a band 6.5. Whereas in the general test, you need to get about band 30. Sorry, you need to get 30 marks to get a band 6.5, right? So that's how it works. So they'll calculate the total mark, and then they have a criteria where they give you the band score based on that, right? So actually, I can show this to you. You can just search. You can do a quick internet search, right? Let me show this to you, right? Mm, so basically, if you go on the internet and you search IELTS, band score marks for reading and listening, right? See, you get the rubrics here, right? But anyway, for listening and reading, it's about how much marks you get, right? So we have included all of this in our study pack, right? That is, if you join our classes, you get a study pack. We have included all that over there, right? But technically, that's how you calculate the marks. For writing, it's a subjective mark in the sense the examiner goes through your answer. They have a marking criteria, and based on that criteria, they give you the marks, right? So for writing, you have 4 different criteria. Again, this is a different lesson. Okay. So 25% each for each criteria, and you get the marks based on that. For speaking, it's the same thing, right? You have 4 different marking criteria, each gets 25%, and they calculate the marks based on that, right? Inoka has asked a question: is it likely to be cancel the paper-based IELTS in the near future? That's a tricky question because there is some talk about that. I believe for UKVI already they have taken steps to cancel the paper-based test. I think that will happen immediately, right? But again, there is no definite answer there, right? They are in talks on whether to do that or not, but nothing has been confirmed, right? Nirmala has asked a question, sir. Is the accent regarding listening varying from country to country? No, right? So usually there are 3 types of accents you can get in the listening test. Mainly a British accent. You might also get an American accent or an Australian accent. Those are the 3 main accents that you will get. But again, we don't know which accent you're going to get because it differs from paper to paper. So if you listen, I mean, you can go through the Cambridge mock practice tests, right? And when you listen to the recording, you understand, okay, this is British, this is Australian, right? This is American, right? But it doesn't vary from country to country. In the sense, in Sri Lanka, they don't play one type of accent. In Pakistan, they don't play one type of accent. They don't do that, right? The papers are standard globally. The papers are standard globally. They play the same recordings anywhere in the world, right? And those are the 3 main accents that they revolve around, all right? So can you recommend any YouTube lessons to improve my writing part? Check out my YouTube channel. I've done multiple writing webinars before, and I've uploaded most of those recordings on YouTube. You can check out the Success Academy YouTube channel, right? Other than that, guys, I mean, I would recommend DP Education as a good site. But of course, DP Education does it in Sinhala. So if you're someone who doesn't understand Sinhala, then you can go for a channel like IELTS Advantage, right? That's a good channel. But of course, check out my channel also because I've done the writing test, especially essay writing, in detail. All right. And I've put it up on YouTube. All right. Someone has asked me, sir, it takes about 6.5 to go to Germany, right? Guys, there is no point in asking a teacher about the score you need to get, like any teacher, not just me, but any teacher, simply because we don't know your requirement. Okay, so to go to Germany, for example, depending on what field of study you're going in, depending on the university you're going to, depending on, see, when you go to Germany, you have completely German universities for which you don't even need IELTS to go to Germany, technically, right? But if you're going to an English speaking university over there, then the university might have a requirement, hey, you have to do IELTS. So you need to check with either the university or you need to check with your visa processing officer, right? Okay, awesome. All right, guys, so I'm seeing a few more questions, but let's go into the reading test first, and then I'll give you another chance to ask questions. All right. Okay. So reading is the second exam in the sequence. What does that mean? It means first you have the listening test, So always your second test is the reading test. All right, listening and reading. That is how the structure goes. Regardless of whether you're doing the general test or the academic test, you have three sections. Okay, academic test එක කරත්, general test එක කරත්, you have three sections. Okay, section 1, section 2, and section 3. Okay, both tests have 1 hour, 60 minutes to complete the entire test. 60 minutes to complete the entire test. How many questions do you have to complete in 60 minutes? 40. 40 questions have to be completed in 60 minutes under three sections. So does 40 equally divide by 3? No. So you might get 13 to 14 questions in each section. Certain sections you might have 13 questions. One particular section you're going to have 14 questions. Is that clear? Right? So 13 to 14 questions in each section. Okay. Guys, something that you really have to pay attention to when doing the reading test is grammar, spellings. Spellings are so important because if your spellings are wrong, you will not get any marks. Okay. So, for example, you might find the correct answer. Let's say the correct answer to a question is cartoon. Okay. This is the correct answer to a question, right? If you have spelled cartoon like this is a wrong answer. The examiner knows you found the right answer. The examiner knows you read the paragraph, you located it, you scanned, you skimmed, you did focused reading, you found the correct answer. But your spellings are incorrect. Therefore, the examiner can't give you any marks. Okay, so it will be marked incorrect. Word count is very important. Again, we'll discuss what this word count is. So there are 6 different types of word counts, okay, that you get in the test. You need to pay attention to it and ensure you stick to it. All right, because if you write over the word count, you're not getting any marks again, right? And finally, time management. I think a lot of people struggle with time management. All right. Most students who have done the test once or twice, when they come for our classes, what they tell us is, sir, one of the reasons that we didn't get the band score we want is because we couldn't manage the time. We spent so much time in part 1 and part 2 that we just didn't have time to complete part 3, right? This is a very common question that we get, all right? So don't worry, all of those things we are going to discuss today. One last question I'm going to answer before we move on. Ishini has asked the question, how can we write or type the answers? Can we use block letters or write normally? It's like this, okay? If you make mistakes while writing proper nouns, right, you will lose marks. So for example, let's say you're writing the name of a country, Canada. Now, if you write Canada like this would be an incorrect answer, a wrong answer, because C in Canada has to be capital. If C in Canada is not capital, it is a wrong answer. Do you understand? Now, instead of risking this, okay, should I write capital C or simple C or whatever, instead of taking that risk, the easiest thing to do is to write answers in block letters. Okay, so this would be a correct answer, right? This would be a correct answer. So all your answers, I would suggest write it in block letters. That way you don't have to go through the stress of thinking, did I write capital in the right places or did I write simple letters in the right places? So forget about writing in a mix of block and simple. Just write everything in block letters. All right. Sachini has asked the same question. Sachini, I hope the answer is clear, right? Just write in block letters. It's just easy. It's the simple thing to do, right? Okay. Now, I'm going to discuss a few strategies that you can use and start implementing today to improve your reading score, your reading comprehension. Okay. Because now one of the major strategies we teach is skimming, scanning, and focused reading. Okay. That is anywhere you go, any class you go, that is the main strategy that anybody teaches. Okay. ඕනම පන්තියක උගන්නන main technique එක තමයි skimming, scanning, focused reading කියලා කියන්නේ. Right? But the thing is, if you don't understand what you are reading, or කියවන දේ ඔයාට තේරෙන්නේ නැත්නම්, if you don't understand what you're reading, it doesn't matter how much you skim, it doesn't matter how much you scan, it doesn't matter how much you focus read, because you will still write the wrong answer. Now, a lot of students struggle with true, false, not given type questions. Why? Because even if they find where the answer is, they can't figure out what is the correct answer because they don't understand what they're reading. Do you understand? So, the number one thing, the most important thing, the top thing, right? I'm using as many synonyms as possible to help you understand this. The number one thing you have to do is improve your comprehension skills, right? Is improve your comprehension skills. Now, if your exam is 2 weeks from now, right? 12 days from now on the 16th, then it's a bit too late for you to kind of focus on comprehension only. Okay. Then you should be just going through past papers or mock practice papers to try and increase your overall scope, right? So for you, if you're doing the exam in the next week or the week after, simply practice the mock practice papers in the strategy of skimming, scanning, and focused reading, which I will teach later. Later in the sense, a bit later in the webinar, right? But for those of you who have 1 month for the test, 2 months for the test, someone said, I'm just getting started. For you guys, you have to work on your comprehension at least for the next 1 to 2 months, right? Alongside practicing papers, you need to work actively on improving your comprehension. Okay, what does that mean? What does improving your comprehension mean, right? Improving your comprehension means improving your ability to understand what is being written. Okay, improving your ability to understand what is being written in the paragraph. How do you do that? Okay, how do you do that? This is the number one way of improving your comprehension: reading and summarizing. Most people or most teachers or most YouTubers would tell you the best way to improve your reading comprehension is to read more. That's not true. I can read all day and not improve my comprehension, right? I'll give you an example. I can read this entire book. It's not a big book, it's about 200 pages, right? I can read this book in probably less than an hour, right? Let's say 2 hours maximum, right? But would I have understood all the key principles? Would I have understood all the important things that are in this book in 2 hours? Probably not, right? But if I take a good, let's say 5 to 6 hours, take time and really read this book, dive into it, highlight the key concepts, right? Maybe mark down some key concepts, mark down the key words. Then after 5 or 6 hours, I can give you a complete rundown of what I learned from this book. Do you understand? So in the first instance, when I read it in 2 hours, my comprehension was low. But when I took 5 hours and really dived into it, my comprehension is more, right? Now, because I've been reading in English for years and years and years and years, reading is my hobby, right? I read as many books as possible. I mean, you can see I have books here, I have books here, right? I have an entire collection of books over here, right? That I just keep near myself and read. Now, I could probably read this in 1 to 2 hours and tell you what I learned because my comprehension has been honed over years, right? I have the ability to simply go through something, skim through something, understand the key concepts, and talk or write about it, right? That is what you call skimming, right? You go through something on you take an overview of something, right? And you grasp the key concepts. That is the true form of skimming, right? But to get to that level, you need to practice first. You need to first go through and practice and read and summarize in order to get to a point where you can read something fast and understand it. So it's not enough to just read. You have to read and then summarize that information. Okay. For example, you take a reading passage from the IELTS exam. Let's take one or two reading passages. First, you read it, right? Then you summarize what you learned in that passage. You take a book and you write down what you learned in those two passages. You highlight the key words that you think will help you talk about this topic better. You find out the words that you don't understand, you Google search it or you chat GPT it, and you find out how to use that word correctly so that when you find that word in another paragraph, you know exactly what that word means. You need to spend about 1 month doing this: reading, summarizing, reading, summarizing, reading, summarizing. Does summarizing mean always writing? No. You can also speak, right? You can read something. Let's say you read the first 3 pages of this book. You speak out what you learned. Okay. Trust me, within about 2 to 3 weeks, maximum a month, your comprehension will improve dramatically. Unbelievably, it will improve because you're reading something, you're understanding it, and you're putting it out. You can't put something out if you don't understand it. Can I teach you a lesson on engineering? I can't, because I don't have the knowledge and I haven't put enough output, or I've never learned enough or understood enough to give you a good output. If I can output something, right? Now, the fact that I'm teaching IELTS, I know the IELTS exam inside out. I know the strategies. I know the question types. I can teach this to you without looking at this slide deck, right? That is how much I have in here, because I've been learning and I've been putting it out. I've been learning, I've been putting it out, right? And over 2 years, I know this like the back of my hand, right? It's the same principle that you have to follow. If you read something, yes, it will go into your head, you might understand it, but by tomorrow you will forget it. හෙට වෙද්දි මේක අමතක වෙනවා. That's why you need to output it. You need to put it out, right? එක්කෝ එක කියන්න ඕනේ. Either you have to say it or either you have to write it. Trust me, believe me, take my word, within 1 month, your comprehension will improve so much. You won't even need strategies to find answers because your comprehension will be so high. Okay, so very, very, very important. If you have 1 month, 2 months for the exam, improving your comprehension is your number one focus. It's your number one focus. All right. Okay, aside from that, aside from reading and summarizing, there are some other strategies specifically for the IELTS reading test that I will discuss now. Just two quick things. Use a pencil to write answers. You can't use a pen. You always have to use a pencil when writing answers. And I've emphasized this before, spellings are extremely important. All right. Okay. When you're practicing the test, the IELTS test, now this is especially important for people who are doing the exam in a close time period, 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, right? Your number one focus should be on getting all the answers correct, not sticking to the time, right? Your focus, ඔගොල්ලොන්ගේ අවධානය තියෙන්න ඕනේ time එක manage කරන්න නෙමෙයි. උත්තර ඔක්කොම හරියන්න. 40න් 40 ගන්න තමයි your number one focus should be when practicing the test. To get 40 out of 40, if you're taking 2 hours, that's completely fine because you're practicing, right? Try your best to understand the strategy, skimming, scanning, focused reading, understand that strategy and find all 40 answers for all 40 questions. It doesn't matter if it takes you 2 hours, right? Once you start getting, let's say, 36 out of 40, 40 out of 40, when you're in that range, then you start cutting down the time little by little by little by little until you can finish the entire paper in about 50 to 55 minutes. 50 minutes might be a bit tough, but 55 minutes is more than possible, right? So don't focus on the time as your first priority. Always focus on getting the maximum amount of marks. So do slow practices at the beginning. So if you have 2 weeks for the exam, the first week, this week, only focus on getting all the answers correct. Forget about the time, right? The next week, the last week, the week before your exam, focus on doing planned or timed papers, right? That's the best strategy you can follow, because if your first priority is time, then you don't have time to learn. You don't have time to identify, okay, these are my mistakes. I'm struggling with matching headings type questions. I'm struggling with true false not given type questions. I need to spend more time to find answers. You don't do any of that analysis if you're trying to stick to the time from the beginning. Okay, if you're trying to stick to the time from the beginning, you're not doing that analysis, and that analysis is too important, right? I can't emphasize the importance of it, right? So the number one thing you have to focus on after comprehension is to get all the answers correct. Then little by little by little by little, cut down on the time. Okay, cut down on the time. And of course, the more you practice, the more days you practice, the more times you practice, the more papers you do, the more marks you're going to get, guaranteed, right? I had a student, again, she was really struggling with the reading test, right? She had already done the test once. I think she had got a band 5. Her requirement was band 6.5. We understood, okay, these are the questions that she is struggling with. Okay, there were about 2 question types that she simply couldn't understand, couldn't get. So what we did was we specifically focused on that type of question, and I got her to practice as much as possible. I taught her the techniques, and I taught her to, okay, every day you have to do about 2 or 3 of these same types of questions sets, right? And then close to the exam, about 1 week before, we started doing timed practices, and every day we were doing 2 papers, 2 papers, 2 papers. At the exam, she got a band 7, right? So from band 5, she went up to band 7 within just a span of about 3 weeks, right? These transitions are properly possible, guys. Now I think today also one student said, hey, I've done the exam 1 or 2 times and I didn't get the result I wanted, and I'm struggling with reading, right? There are so many students that come to us with this problem, guys. It's not just you, you're not a one-off case. So many students are struggling with this, right? But the system is there. I can definitely teach you exactly what you need to do to get to the score you want. All right. And these, what I told you, are the steps that you need to take. Number 1, improve your comprehension. Number 2, start doing slow practices so that you get all the answers correct. Number 3, start doing timed practices. And number 4, make sure you're doing that every single day. Okay. All right. Okay. So keep in mind, you have 3 texts that you have to read. All right. Now, if you're doing the general test, I'll show you a paper. Okay. I'll show you a paper. Yes, this is a general test. Okay. General reading test. So, guys, general reading test has 3 sections. This is section 1. Okay. So, you have 1 paragraph and you have 6 questions from that paragraph. Section 1 is still not over. You have a second paragraph. Paragraph dekak tiyanawa section 1 neki, right? And you have another set of questions, another 8 questions, right? So 6 and 8 is 14. So part 1 here has 14 questions. Some part 1s only have 13 questions, but this question, there are 14 questions. So you can see part 1, section 1 has 2 paragraphs, right? Then you go to section 2. Here is the first paragraph. You have a set of questions. And here is the second paragraph. Again, you have a set of questions, right? Then you have section 3. This is one lengthy paragraph, all right? This is one lengthy paragraph, all right? And you have all the questions from that one paragraph, okay? All the questions are from that one paragraph. So you can see 3 sections, but 5 paragraphs. 3 sections, but 5 paragraphs, all right? The academic test is different. This is section 1 and paragraph 1. So this whole thing is one paragraph. This whole thing, right? And then you have 13 questions. Then you have section 2. This whole thing is one paragraph. Now you can see why the academic test is a bit more difficult than the general test. The general test is broken down. Now, I'm going to use a controversial example, right? It's like the local A-level syllabus and the or local A-level test and the London A-level test, right? The London A-level test is a bit easy. I don't know if anyone has done the London A-level test here. You can put your hand up and correct me if I'm wrong. But the London A-level test is a bit easier because it's broken down into sections. So you have to do first your A1, your A2, and whatever. So it's broken down into sections. Whereas with the local A-level syllabus, 2 years of content you have to study for one exam. That is what is happening with the general and academic test. In the general test, you have section by section. Okay, you have one small paragraph, then 6 questions. Another small paragraph, another 6 questions. So you go to part 2, and then it's easier, right? Because you only have to focus on one section at a time. Here, with the academic test, it's one full paragraph and you have to answer 13 questions, right? There are different question types from the same paragraph. Tricky. So that is why the academic test is a bit more difficult, right? A bit more difficult. So you have paragraph number 2, right? And the questions. And then you have paragraph number 3 and the questions. All right. Okay. No one has done the no one has done the London A-level exam here. No one has put the text, right? So in both the tests, right, general and academic, you have close to 2,400 words, okay? Because each text has about 800 words. In the general test, it's broken down, but in the academic test, it's all together. So about 800 words you have to read, and then you have to find answers to questions, right? It's tricky. It's not an easy thing to do, right? Close to 2,400, 2,500 words, right? So you must use the skimming, scanning, and focused reading technique, right? Skimming, scanning, and focused reading technique. Guys, this is not some magical technique that I have created. It's not some magical technique that I have found out and I'm telling you is the best. Guys, this is what IDP, this is what British Council, this is what Cambridge has taught us, and I'm teaching you. All right, skimming, scanning, focused reading. We'll talk about how to do that. All right, we'll talk about how to do that when we discuss the paper, right? Okay, so all of these we have discussed, which is, you have to read, you have to summarize, and all of that, right? Now we'll go on to the question types. Okay. Now here you see an answer sheet, right? Remember, unlike the listening test, with the reading test, you don't get any extra time to write your answers here. So you find the correct answer, directly write it on the answer sheet. Okay. For computer-based test takers, it's a lot easier. You have the reading test on one side, you have the answers or you have the questions on another side. So it's very easy. All you have to do is read and write the right answer here, nothing else. For physical test takers, you have the question paper separately, and this is your answer sheet. Okay. I'll send you all a link on the group. You all can, for those of you who are doing the computer-based test, there is a step-by-step tutorial of how the exam will happen, right? What you need to do, how to drag, how to highlight, how to select the answers. I'll send a tutorial on the group. Okay. All right. These are the different types of questions that you will get.